All right, Mr. Chairman, I'm back. All right, Commissioner Farley,
Yes.
Commissioner Logan, excuse me, Commissioner Powers,
Sorry, I couldn't get it unmuted. Aye, yes.
okay. Commissioner Dale Reeves,
Yes.
Commissioner Robert Sills,
Yes.
Commissioner Bill Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the motion, all in favor, motion passes.
Thank you, sir. Next thing on the agenda is resolution to augment solar setbacks and RFED resolution, and also a resolution to increase solar setbacks from residences on minor roads. We'll just handle those both together if that's okay, Mayor.
Okay, that sounds like a plan.
Is Mr. Pittner here?
He is here, he's in the room with me. I'm gonna twist you to him. Give me about 2 seconds.
Hello, Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Pittner, would you please go through the first one for us?
One of these, Mr. Chairman, is something the Planning Commission has indicated to me they did not want to pursue, and that being the one having to do with setbacks. It's the one that's it'd be the second one in the packet that was originally slated to go before the County Commission on the 22nd of September, I believe. And I think that is on the agenda before you. I think that's item number 3. I think, and I believe now we're in item number 2.
That's correct, sir.
Okay. This amendment, first, let me inform you, the last 3 sections in there don't pertain to solar. Well, the last section is the effective date. That would apply, but sections 10 and 11 have to do with, well, that would be the RPED setback. I correct myself. It's been so long in the hopper, I've forgotten it. When a couple of years ago, the County Commission adopted changes to eliminate the requirement that a setback along an RPED district boundary had to be greater on one side of that boundary than it did on the other. When we wrote that amendment into the code, we got our section numbers right. In the amendment, the section numbering was actually wrong. And sections 10 and 11 of this amendment is to correct that simple number. That's all. It is not related to the solar in any way. So when I tell you that the number 2 was not titled correctly, it actually was titled correctly. It's referring to those last 2 sections, 10 and 11. But that would simply correct a misnumbering in an amendment a couple of years ago and has nothing to do with solar. So with that point, I'll proceed on to the solar elements of this thing, which I know is the topic of great interest to everyone. There are basically 3 dimensions to this that are of concern, I think. One has to do with some design matters, having to do with the height of structures and underground, planning all of the wiring and so forth underground. The Board of Appeals does have some discretion in these matters, but the code also has some just flat standards, and this is to try to repair those or fix those based on things we've learned. We don't want to put any more underground than we have to, and there's some that's going to have to be underground in these facilities, but we don't want to put any more underground than have to, particularly light gauge type wire that just connects between solar panels, because when you put it down, then you have to take it back out. And it's a whole lot easier to pick up when it's running along the base of the panels than it is if it's 3 or 4 feet underground. So, and as regards height, on the substation location, they need some structures that are relatively higher than the current 25 feet, small amount, I think, whereas panels, all of those will be under 20 feet. Every other structure out there will be under 20 feet. It's probably under 12, 15 feet. So that would stand to change. The other 2 dimensions, and I mean, there's more to it than this, but I'm trying to address primarily what is seems to be of concern, is financial. The present provision states, just deals with when they choose to shut down a facility, called decommissioning and to stop its operation. Now, I mean, let me site, but find the exact code section for that. On there. That's in section 8 of the amendment. That's at the bottom of the second page of the amendment. That would broaden the board's capacity to obtain financial assurance beyond just when the operator or owner decides of their own volition to shut the facility down. And would extend to the board finding that after a hearing and due process, which has to be provided, that the facility is not operating in conformity with either codified standards that govern continuing obligation or continuing operations, or supplemental conditions that have been imposed, or the operations and maintenance plan that is required. If any of those are found to not be in conformity, the board can revoke the special exception and order that the facility be shut down. And the financial assurance is to make sure that that would happen, because the chief enforcement action would be against the landowner, and the solar facility owner would have to provide a bond to each landowner to enable him to carry out that shutdown. Now, the board also would have the capacity to go after the facility owner as well. But the longstanding principle right here has been, and it served us well, that we hold the landowner ultimately responsible. So that's the financial component. As you can see, and it would include the shutdown when the facility reached the end of its useful life as well. But these other provisions would apply as well. And the way they would actually operate is we would have 1 page, maybe 2 pages in the site plan, depending on how much space we need, for all of these things. And the bond will reference those pages by number in the site plan. The bond itself would not have to be provided until after site plan approval was obtained, but it would have to be submitted before building permits could be issued. This would save the developer the necessity to undertake something that's rather laborious when you're talking about 14 landowners until they know they've got site plan approval. But until they get it done, they cannot get a building permit. So the sequence is site plan approval, bond provision, building permit. The last provision, which I know is of some concern to a few commissioners, has to do with access. We started out with this. We could foresee that one vital element in these facilities would be their visibility. And we got good standards to deal with those, and I think they've been well applied. At the site north of town, there are 4 locations where they're going to have to put in some additional landscaping, but the rest of it will pretty much be out of sight just by virtue of existing topography and land cover. If one of those 4 locations, we're requiring them to put in landscaping. We're also requiring them to put in about a 4-foot berm. Now, there have been 2 other things we've learned. One is with respect to drainage. Solar farms will generally generate less runoff than farm fields because grass is planted under those panels, and it's that rather than dirt, and it will absorb more of the water rather than allow it to run off. But that does not mean that at every location around the perimeter of these facilities that there will be less runoff. There may be locations where there will be more runoff, and we need to know where those are so that we can make sure that they mitigate by detention basins or drop basin, drop inlets, or whatever mechanism the engineers may settle upon. We required them to do a drainage study in this facility to make that determination. And we used a consulting engineer out of A2H, SQ Hargraves, Bill Edwards, who used to be the city engineer at Germantown, and drainage is his specialty. And he affirmed that provided proper erosion control was installed, grass was planted, that there would be no additional runoff at any location around the perimeter of this facility. The third thing that we have learned that we need to pay attention to is access, because there's quite a substantial amount of traffic that goes into these facilities as they are being built. Now, once they are finished, there's not going to be a great deal, there'll be very little, as a matter of fact. But in addition to the construction vehicles, of course, there's all the workforce there. There's one down in Mitchell County, Georgia, which is about the same size as this one's going to be. I called them a couple of times to find out, to ask them specific questions about their process. They're not nearly as sophisticated as ours is, but they have told me that they have about 300 people working down there. That's just the employment. That's not the materials. That's not the piers. That's not the solar panels. That's not the inverters, which will come in one per truck. One inverter on a flatbed is about like rolled steel. We've seen those going down the highway. So access is important, and there's a proposal that they all have to either have access off a state highway or off of a gravel road, a gravel county road that itself accesses a state highway. There's a lot of money in these, Mr. Chairman. I think commented last time we talked about this, that what's involved in some locations, you could probably manage to build your own gravel driveway to a state road in many of these cases. So those are the principal matters there. I've been glad to answer any questions. The Planning Commission has recommended these to you. I'm actually glad that the County Commission or the Development Committee tabled this the last time it came up, or the County Commission tabled it rather, the last time it came up, because I realized in the aftermath that I can improve on those financial provisions and the requirements there. In fact, I had some language at the outset of it that could have been read to put a burden on the county that we certainly didn't intend to do, not financial, but a responsibility of who was to see to something, that it was always intended that it would be the developer. So we got that rectified, and I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chairman, and try to answer any questions.
All right, just for the record, we're discussing the item number 2, resolution to augment solar setback. Any questions, gentlemen?
Mr. Chairman, Terry Leggett, I'd like to be heard.
All right, sir, 1 minute. Let me make sure no one on the committee wants to speak, then I'll let you talk.
Okay.
Mr. Walker?
Last time, it's some changing. I agree. We need these financial responsibilities definitely need to be put in place for them. I still have a problem with the access being limited to only state road or county gravel roads. I know we limited last time within a mile of a TVA line. I still would like to see a map as to where, with the limits we put this on, where how much area are we limited to now?
I think that's an excellent question, Mr. Chairman. If I may I answer?
Yes.
I think that's an excellent question. I directed our GIS person, or I have a call in for a GIS person who's out today to query the GIS system and layer in these various provisions that we currently have, see what map that gives us, then add this one about access and see what that will leave us. And the difference between the two will answer the commissioner's question. I think it's a great question. I don't know what it will show. It may be that once we see that difference, some solution out of this disagreement may write itself. And I think that's an excellent idea. And if the committee wanted to table this thing until we get that answered, I think it would be a good idea.
Commissioner Powers.
Mr. Chairman.
Wait, let Mr. Walker finish, please. Go ahead, Mr. Walker, if you weren't through.
Yeah, my only other question was on the second one. You're saying that you want us to recommend not to approve the setback changes. Is that correct?
That's the 500 feet to 1,000 feet. Yes, sir. That's I never liked some of them to begin with, and the Planning Commission, after some further discussion, when you all tabled it back in September, decided they didn't either.
That's all the question I have at the time.
I believe Mr. Powers is next.
I'll go ahead and yield to Robbie, to Commissioner Sells.
Mr. Seals?
Yeah, I've got a few comments and potentially a motion. I don't know the order here we're going to go, but we've had this discussion multiple times about different aspects of this, and it seems it's definitely cropped up as a lightning rod issue right now, no pun intended. But it is a hot button topic. You can talk to people all across the county, and they all feel differently about it. I believe it, and I'm speaking for myself, but I believe I speak for a lot of us that I've got a whole lot more questions than I've got answers when people ask me about solar farms, or when I even research about what's allowed and what's not. And I'm very grateful and appreciative to the work that the Planning Commission has done to date, and Mr. Pittner and his staff as well. I think we're certainly on the right track, but I would propose, and maybe this, form this into a motion how we may, but I would propose two things from the way I see it from my standpoint. One, I think it would benefit all of us to take a pause, to maybe a 6-month hiatus, moratorium, whatever you want to call it, on solar farms in general. And let's develop a committee that looks at all aspects of this. So we're not coming back with a different amendment and different change every month with something else that we've thought of or discovered. But let's assemble all of our thoughts and all of our suggestions and have some people from all aspects. Maybe, I mean, I would even be willing to be a part of that. Not that I have any more knowledge than anybody else, but create that committee that looks at this holistically, because I think one thing is certain about these: they're not going to generate any more money for the county than that crop of beans or that field of cotton is going to generate. They're going to generate money for a landowner or two here and there, but the potential side effects at the end of the day are catastrophic on the county as a whole down the road. If it becomes evident that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, this was a fad to produce energy and there's another better, faster, stronger way to produce energy, now we're left with junkyards full of metal sitting out there that are not easily repurposed as a farm crop would be easily repurposed. That's one of my concerns. I just think from a wise standpoint that the best thing for us to do is let's call a timeout. Let's look at this, develop one recommendation that will cover all things, including that would be the map of the areas that this could cover. And let's present that back to the development committee to be heard one time and for approval at that point. I don't know how you guys feel about that. I don't know if I've orated that very well, but that's my thoughts, being concerned with the amount of questions that are out there.
Commissioner Powers here.
1 minute. From my understanding, you make a motion that there is no more new solar farms for a moratorium for the next 6 months on any new solar farms, correct?
Correct.
I've got a motion. Let's get a second.
I would say that we establish a general moratorium on solar farms for the next 6 months.
All right. We do have 1 or 2 already in the system, so we can't do that, but we can do on new solar farms for the next 6 months. Is that acceptable to you?
Yes, from a go forward basis, like you said, anything that's already been heard and done, we can't get that toothpaste back in the tube, but from a go forward standpoint, that's what I would propose.
I'm just making sure the wording was correct, and I believe. Next, I need a motion, then we can have discussion, Mr. Powers.
I will second that motion for the purpose of discussion.
Thank you, sir. All right, Mr. Powers, recognize you. Go ahead, sir.
I tend to agree with Commissioner Sills. There's so many times that this has come back to us already. I know it's of great concern to many of our residents here. I also know it's of great concern from both sides of the issue. I think agree with Commissioner Sills in regard to the majority of it. I think, though, if I can offer up an amendment, that we do need to address the financial aspect of it as a separate issue because of the 1 or 2 existing ones that are there. And I would amend that we would accept the proposed language that Mr. Pittner has put out regarding the financial security of the county.
I agree with you, Mr. Powers, but you can't chop up this resolution. It has to go through as a whole. It can't be pieced out. So we'd have to ask Mr. Pittner to go through the motions. Oh, wait, he's got his hand up. Go ahead, Mr.
The present code says that, I'll quote, in the course of facility location review or facility design review, and the Yum Yum facility is in the latter stage, the Board of Appeals may impose such additional conditions and or restrictions upon a proposed solar photovoltaic facility as it may deem necessary in furtherance of the intents and purposes of this resolution. So and there's another clause, but it doesn't negate that. Now, we're relying on that. If the development committee, the county commission refuses this amendment, we are going to rely on that for the financial assurance in much the same format. In fact, I'm working with their attorney right now, and he has pretty much conceded that that's the way they'll do it, and he won't give us too much heartburn about it. So it is not as strong a provision as you have before you, as I've written, and as I hope you ultimately will adopt. But there's not much time to rely on anything else but this. So I do have a fallback, but you're correct, Mr. Chairman, we can't chop this up. We would have to go back to the planning commission, create yet another amendment, have another hearing. And while we've got these other questions going on, it would be very difficult, particularly in the COVID setting. We're trying to avoid that. So I would like to be left to rely on this, this other provision in the meantime. Let me point out another thing too, particularly Commissioner Seals, if I may. This thing has five steps to it. 2 principal steps are location approval and design approval. We deliberately strung out this process, made it multi-level, multifaceted, multi-timed, because I knew we had a lot to learn about this as we went through. And I didn't want to let the horse entirely out of the barn until we had kind of a protracted process, several shots at this thing to make sure that if we didn't catch something in one early stage, we might be able to catch it later. And the amendments you're seeing are reflective of what we are learning as we go through. I can't tell you there won't be some more. I can only tell you that by the time I get through, maybe I'll write the definitive book on it, because the American Planning Association has nothing out there. There are no webinars, no seminars, no instructional manuals. There's the other jurisdictions just have ordinances that deal with setbacks. Nobody east of the Mississippi seems to have anything. We're learning as we go. We and a lot of others. We have a more sophisticated process than most, and we have built into our process deliberately the capacity to learn and to fix things before something entirely gets away from us. So some of what you're saying is by design, and it's just what happens when you have things to learn. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go right ahead. Mr. Leggett, I haven't forgot you. Just one more minute. Did you have something, Mr. Walker?
No, sir.
Mr. Leggett, go ahead, sir.
I wanted to address your committee, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. I totally agree with Commissioner Seals. We need to slow this process down till we investigate it. We are putting this county at risk if we look 20 to 30 years out. These restrictions would restrict solar farms to 221 square miles. That's probably 50% of all the tillable land in the county. And we don't know what's going to happen 20 years down the road. I would hate to be on a commission that allowed something that 20 years from now, all the citizens, because probably won't be here in 20 years from now, all the citizens of the county would say, who were those dummies that allowed this to happen? I think if this was a junkyard asking to put in over 80 something square miles or 200 square miles, we would all be against it. And we would go back and we would look at our zoning and everything to protect the county. If it were a landfill, we would do that. Well, solar farms have cadmium and other heavy metals in them. And if we were to have a catastrophic tornado that came through and wiped out this 2,500 acre Yum Yum facility or 1,500 acre Yum Yum facility, and they don't have enough insurance to fix it, they're an LLC, they bankrupt, it goes back on the farmer, and it costs $10 million to clear it up. I'm just using that number. He's going to say, y'all can have the land because I'm not going to spend $10 million. And we don't have $10 million to spend. So those are the things that I would hope that if y'all do recommend a moratorium, that we allow the mayor to form a committee. I've talked with the Industrial Development Board, and some of those members are adamantly opposed to it because it destroys their ability to try to look into the future for industrial development of the county if we allow solar farms to come in if we happen to be the place for them to want to line up because of our capacity with overhead power lines. And let the mayor appoint a small committee, because big committees become unmanageable, and us go out and look at it and come back to you with factual data. There's a county in Virginia that has limited their solar expansion to 300 acres, and they only allow them to do 50 acres at a time. That way they can control it. I'm not saying that's what we should do, but I think that for the benefit of all the people in our county, that we should look at every aspect and bring it back to your committee and let your committee decide what y'all want to recommend to the full commission. I applaud the Planning Commission. I applaud the BZA, but they're not elected. So whatever they pass, we get blamed for as the legislators. And I can't tell you everybody that's on those committees. So when somebody asks me who decided this, I'd have to go look it up. And but I can tell them who's on the commission. And I think that things of this nature need to go before our committees, elected officials, and then ultimately end up in front of the full commission so that elected officials have to justify what they're doing to allow certain things. And thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. I also have questions about which I've been bringing up since the beginning. There's definitions I'd like to find out about what is a major county road. Also, how many gravel roads in the county attached to state highways is a question I'd like to answer, but there's a ton more. So I think a moratorium on new construction would be a good idea and consider seriously. Only thing I recommend, and Mr. Leggett, I understand where you're coming from, but please remember, we represent the landowners that have the farms also. They're part of the people of the county, and their financial well-being to take advantage of what's best for their property is something we ought to consider also. Solar farms is the new green energy. It's what we're needing to go to as a nation here slowly but surely. And so we ought to take the time at least to give it a chance and to check in everything. So I think the moratorium on 6 months on new construction would be a very good idea. So that's my 2 cents.
I agree with that. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, we have a motion and a second. Let's do a roll call. All in favor say aye.
It don't work that way. Would you like me to do the roll call, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
Mr. Farley,
Aye.
Commissioner Powers,
Yes.
Commissioner Dale Reeves,
Yes.
Commissioner Robert Sills,
Yes.
Commissioner Bill Walker.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, everybody's in favor of it, passes unanimously. That is for the moratorium portion of it.
Thank you, sir. Also, the committee that needs to investigate this is this committee. So y'all figure on a night or 2 each month while we go through the steps when Mr. Pittner get ready for us, because we're the ones that are duly elected and appointed to do it. So the development committee will be the one that does the investigating of it. Do we consider the second one now, or the second one is just a part of the first one, I guess?
Do y'all want to, if we can table, I think everybody's agreed that tabling it's not going to be a problem.
No, it's
So-
I'll make a motion, we table these until the moratorium. Before we get to the
Commissioner
moratorium.
Powers, seconds.
well, let me,
Hold on, all right, Mr. Chairman.
let me ask that this amendment, the one that involves the financial and the road access, that it be tabled until the February County Commission meeting. And allow me to get together, to gather the information about where and how much that Commissioner Walker has asked, and submit that information to him and see if perhaps he and I can find an answer to our apparent disagreement, which additional information may resolve that disagreement. It may very well do that. I really like his idea, but let's put this off until February. And then of course we go ahead, and then there's a moratorium on this provision in the code that governs what's underway now. and then the moratorium for 6 months on anything new. But I would ask that this amendment not be needlessly locked up for 6 months. You can always do that later, but let's leave that door open now. Because if it is adopted, I will have a stronger hand in the terms and negotiating the terms of this financial assurance with Invenergy with regard to the amendment. I think I may do with what I got, but I'll be stronger if you pass it. I realize I need to resolve something with Commissioner Walker in order to do that, if I may.
So Mayor, we've just put a moratorium on this and all solar farms coming up for the next, all new solar farms coming up for the next 6 months. That's passed.
Yeah.
Is there a way to bring the financials to the board in February?
Yes, sir, because we've still got 2 active ones out there, and if they pertain to them, and if we can add something to it, that would be of benefit. And if we table it to February and we don't get the answers, we can always table it for another month until everybody's satisfied with it. So rather than just kick it totally down the road, we know we got to address it. There's some parts of it I think everybody agrees with. Let's just see if we can work through it, and 1 month would probably be good at this stage.
All right, I need a motion to table what he just said, the financials, to the
So
February meeting.
moved. Commissioner Seals, so moved.
Seals moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Walker. Any discussion? Roll call vote, Mayor.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Farley,
Aye.
Commissioner Powers,
Yes.
Commissioner Dale Reeves,
Pass.
Commissioner Robert Sills,
Yes.
Commissioner Bill Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, motion passes. All in favor.
Thank you, gentlemen. I believe we can move to the last item now, the rezoning request.
Are you waiting for me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
This is a tract of land of about 1.3 acres on Mosby Drive, a little bit outside downtown Macon, that was rezoned for a store about 35 years ago. Just a couple of months before they hired me into this job for the first time, as a matter of fact. The store didn't last very long. It has been just sitting out there ever since, and a gentleman has bought it who's a FedEx pilot from Dayton, Ohio, who wants a place to rest when he's in Memphis, and he's going to place a motor home out there and use it as a place of repose. But it is zoned business 1. It was an old spot zoning. It was not good zoning when it was done. And this is an opportunity. We're always keen to these to take it back to residential. It's much like the Veronica Houston location was on 193 a couple of years ago. If you remember, another location that was between Moscow and Williston as well came along not too long after that. This is in that same tradition, and the Planning Commission's recommendation is favorable to you. The staff recommendation is favorable. This would be a good rezoning to return the character of the neighborhood.
Is the gentleman here that's requesting rezoning?
He's not in this room with me, but he knows about the meeting tonight.
Is there anybody in the council
Yes.
room that has?
Let me check real quick, Mr. Chairman.
While he's looking,
Okay.
Mr. Pittner, I got one quick question about this. The drawing of the plot on the map shows that one line is going straight through the property and the house of the one right beside it. But we're just zoning it to be residential like everything else, correct?
Yes, sir. The property lines have not changed since the original rezoning. There's been no change. What has been changed is there was discovered when GIS was done at this and a lot of other locations too, that 100 years of mapping technology by hand, by protractor and scale, sometimes doesn't square up with modern technology. And where that's encountered by local property assessors, they have to do the best with it they can. And every once in a while, it comes to the attention of the planners when they are creating a database and putting zoning in it, and they're mapping those things too. And then they stumble across one of the problems the property assessor has encountered, which is what this is. It's probably happened dozens of times across Fayette County, and I bet you thousands of times across Tennessee. But that's what you're seeing, Mr. Chairman. But the application he signed corresponds exactly to the deed that he's got, and the legal description on that deed corresponds exactly to the rezoning 35 years ago.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman,
sir. Yes, sir.
it's Commissioner Sills. I move we approve.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, Mr. Powers, second. Any discussion? It's not. All right, we have a motion and a second. No discussion. I call for a roll call vote, sir.
Commissioner Farley.
Aye.
Commissioner Powers,
Yes.
Commissioner Dale Reeves,
Yes.
Commissioner Robert Sills,
Yes.
Commissioner Bill Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, passes unanimously.
Thank you, Mayor. That takes care of all the business for us. Is there any new business, Mayor?
No, sir.
I make a motion, we adjourn. Thank you, gentlemen.
All right. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mayor, I guess we hang up and dial into the next one, right?
Yes, sir. Give me just a second. I got to throw that one together in